The criminal underworld is shrouded in darkness, where ruthless individuals rise to power and notoriety. In this exploration, we delve into the lives of infamous black mafia bosses like Big Meech, who lived a life of extravagance until he was sentenced to 30 years in prison, to Jeff Fort, who openly threatened cops, and then to the chilling violence of God, who ruled through fear and intimidation. These figures built their legacies on a foundation of power, wealth, and control. Without any further ado, let's take a look at these stories. Demetrius Big Meech Flannery. Big Meech, born Demetrius Edward Flannery, rose to infamy as a leader of the Black Mafia family, BMF, a powerful drug trafficking organization. Born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1968, Demetrius began his criminal career in Detroit, selling drugs as a teenager. He, along with his brother, quickly expanded their operations, establishing connections with Mexican cartels and dominating the drug trade in Atlanta, Georgia, and other cities. Demetrius, known for his extravagant lifestyle, became a regular fixture in Atlanta's club scene, often surrounded by BMF members. He popularized the practice of making it rain with money at strip clubs. However, his high-profile presence also attracted law enforcement attention. In the early 2000s, a series of incidents, including a shooting at an Atlanta nightclub, led to increased scrutiny and a rift between the Flannery brothers. BMF's operations were extensive, with over 500 members in multiple states. They controlled the drug trade by offering lower prices to distributors, thanks to their direct connection with a Mexican cartel. The organization's success led to a federal investigation, Operation Motor City Mafia, which resulted in numerous arrests and seizures of cash and drugs. This is what attorney Joshua Schiffer has to say about them.
BMF was the first group that was accused of being both a criminal organization and a record label.
Both Flannery brothers were eventually apprehended and charged with various crimes, including drug trafficking and money laundering. Demetrius, despite his public image, had a stronger legal case due to a lack of direct evidence against him. Despite the pressure, the man refused to take a deal or snitch on his partners, which has earned him respect in the streets.
And he went down. And when he went down, he and his brother were sentenced to 30 years in prison.
In 2008, Demetrius and Terry pleaded guilty and received 30-year sentences in federal prison. Their convictions marked the end of a decades-long criminal enterprise that had escaped the clutches of authorities for years. Next mafia boss is known for introducing crack cocaine to Washington, which led to a surge in crime and earned D.C. the title of the murder capital of the United States. Rafel Edmund. Rafel Edmund III, born in 1964, was a prominent drug trafficker in Washington, D.C. during the 1980s crack epidemic. Edmund's criminal career was marked by his large-scale cocaine distribution, with estimates of purchasing 2,000 kilos weekly and generating approximately $300 million annually. His organization, employing 150 people, was responsible for 30 murders in a single year. Edmund's lavish lifestyle included frequenting Georgetown Hoyas basketball games, where he befriended players like John Turner and Alonzo Mourning. Georgetown coach John Thompson, aware of Edmund's activities, confronted him and demanded he stay away from his players. What a bold guy. This encounter, which could have led to retaliation, surprisingly did not result in any consequences for Thompson. Edmund's arrest in 1989 and subsequent trial received widespread media attention. The trial featured unprecedented security measures, with jurors' identities kept secret and the courtroom enclosed in bulletproof glass. Edmund was convicted of various federal charges, including engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise and conspiracy to distribute cocaine. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and his mother and other family members also received lengthy sentences for their involvement. Even while incarcerated, Edmund continued his drug trafficking activities, conducting business from a federal prison phone. This led to an additional 30-year sentence in 1996. However, in 1996, he became a government informant, helping authorities arrest 11 alleged drug dealers in D.C. in exchange for a reduced sentence for his mother. In 2019, hearings were held to consider reducing his life sentence based on his cooperation in solving 20 homicides. In 2021, a judge granted his release, but he still has a separate 30-year sentence to serve. In July 2024, Edmund was transferred to a halfway house in Kentucky or Tennessee, marking a significant step towards his reintegration into society. This next mafia boss maintained control through violence and intimidation, effectively keeping rival gangs and law enforcement away. Daryl God Whiting. Daryl Whiting, notoriously known as God, rose to prominence in the illicit drug trade in the late 1980s and early 1990s. He established his dominance in the crack cocaine business by controlling the Orchard Park Project in Boston as the leader of the feared drug gang, the New York Boys. Whiting's criminal empire flourished through the widespread distribution of crack cocaine, generating immense profits that reached millions of dollars and simultaneously devastating local communities. Whiting's era was marked by his dominant authority over his territory. The Orchard Park Project became the central base of operations for his drug trade, and the housing project essentially transformed into the epicenter of his criminal activities. Under Whiting's leadership, the New York Boys expanded their influence, solidifying their dominance in the region's drug market. He also had a flourishing social club in Town Hall, but it was merely a front for his drug trade. The methods employed by Whiting were brutal and highly effective. His capacity to maintain control through violence guaranteed the uninterrupted operation of his gang's activities. Whiting's influence extended far beyond Boston, impacting drug markets and criminal enterprises across the entire Northeast region. However, his reign lasted only 5 years. During this time, they generated an astonishing $100,000 per day. However, their empire was infiltrated by an undercover Boston housing police officer named Jeff Koch, who proved to be a formidable opponent. Koch, along with his fellow officers, successfully dismantled the New York Boys operation, resulting in notorious prison sentences. The leader, Daryl Whiting, was given a life sentence for orchestrating this extensive criminal network. Now, this next drug kingpin's rise and fall is as captivating as his permanent mark in Los Angeles, California. Ricky Donnell, Freeway Ricky Ross. He is better known as Freeway Ricky Ross. Ross's early life was rather normal, with his exceptional tennis skills at Susan Miller Dorsey High School and his struggle with illiteracy, which robbed him of a potential college tennis career. This illiteracy ultimately introduced him to crack cocaine as a teenager, a substance he didn't even recognize as a drug due to its unfamiliar appearance. He built a drug empire that reigned from 1982 to 1989, generating an astonishing $900 million in revenue and nearly $300 million in profits. Here is what Rick Ross had to say about his profits on the Joe Rogan podcast.
How much money do you think you earned over the entire course of selling drugs?
Well, you figure my 2 best years, so you say 360 days in a year, just those 2 years, it was like, what, 600 million, something like that.
However, his criminal enterprise came crashing down in 1996 when he was sentenced to life. Imprisonment under the 3 strikes law for a cocaine purchase from an undercover agent. A twist of fate emerged when journalist Gary Webb uncovered a connection between Ross's supplier, Danilo Blandin, and the CIA's Iran-Contra scandal. This revelation reduced his sentence to 20 years. Ross was released in 2009 only to be arrested in 2015 on suspicion of drug-related cash possession, carrying $100,000 during a traffic stop. He denied the charges and was eventually cleared. Next on this list is a drug lord nicknamed Fat Cat, who rose to infamy to be the top lord in New York's 1980s. Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols. Born on Christmas Day in 1958, Nichols' early years in Alabama were unremarkable until he moved to Queens, New York, where his criminal journey began. He dropped out of school and joined the Seven Crowns gang, leading to robberies and an early prison sentence. Released after a brief stint, he entered the drug trade, leveraging Mafia connections to establish a vast network in Queens. Nichols' crew was largely composed of close family members, including his mother and 2 sisters. His operation was headquartered at his deli, Big Mac's Deli, a business he and his wife Joanne took over from her father. However, a raid in 1985 led to his arrest and a series of events that changed his life. Released on bail, he was soon arrested again for parole violation by his parole officer Brian Rooney. In retaliation, Nichols ordered his lackeys to rough up Rooney, which resulted in the officer's murder. From prison, he orchestrated murders, including that of Isaac Bolden for robbing his then-girlfriend, Carolyn Tyson. He also ordered the demise of his former girlfriend, Myrtle Horsham, for stealing money from his operation, despite their shared son. He said that he took out his ex because she was my girl and she took my money and spent it on another person. The violence engulfed Nichols' family when his wife was kidnapped and his mother's home was firebombed, leading to his half-sister's death. Facing numerous convictions, he received a 25-year-to-life sentence in 1988. In 1992, Nichols pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including murder and federal drug offenses, receiving a 40-year sentence. Today, Lorenzo Nichols serves time in a New York prison. "I have nothing but time to ponder my misdeeds," Nichols wrote in a letter, adding, "To the victims of my criminal activities, I offer my deepest regret and sincerest apology. However, it is no use crying over spilt milk now." Next up is a queenpin who dominated the cocaine trade in South Central Los Angeles and had a vast network of distributors across the country. Jemer Thompson. Jemer Thompson Hairston rose to prominence during the turbulent era of the 1980s crack epidemic in the United States. Thompson's childhood in South Los Angeles began with a traumatic eviction when she was 8. She recalls, "I knew then that I wanted money and that I wanted to control everything." This desire for control and financial security became a driving force in her life. As a high school student, she ran track and was romantically involved with Anthony Daff Mosley, a marijuana dealer, for whom she started collecting payments. Thompson's entry into the drug trade began in high school, selling 3 to 4 kilos of cocaine weekly. She and Daff married in 1980 and expanded their operations to crack cocaine. Their success allowed them to purchase a home in Encino, California, and they welcomed a son in 1982. After Daff was murdered, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA agents monitoring her, expected her to quit, but she had other plans. In 1984, she rebuilt her empire, recruiting distributors nationwide and sourcing cocaine directly from Colombian producers. At 26, she opened a hair distribution business, allegedly a front for laundering drug profits. However, her criminal enterprise faced a significant setback when her business partner, Percy Cheese Bratton, was arrested and provided evidence against her. At 31, Thompson was arrested at her son's 6th grade graduation ceremony, charged with conspiracy to distribute cocaine and money laundering. She was convicted and served 12 years of a 15-year sentence. Another kingpin whose life took a tumultuous path from gang leadership to a lengthy prison sentence is Jeff Fort. Born in 1947 in Mississippi, Fort's early years in Chicago's Woodlawn neighborhood were marked by his involvement with Eugene "Bull" Hairston, with whom he founded the Blackstone Rangers gang in the late 1950s. The Blackstone Rangers evolved into a powerful force in Chicago, with a membership of 5,000 by the mid-1960s. Following Hairston's imprisonment in 1966, Fort took charge and rebranded the gang as the almighty Black P. Stone Nation. However, their activities turned criminal, including extortion, forced recruitment, and controlling vice operations. In 1969, Fort faced legal troubles for misusing federal funds, resulting in a contempt of Congress conviction and a 5-year prison sentence in 1972. Upon his release, Fort converted to Islam, taking the name Prince Malik, and renamed the gang El Ruk tribe of the Moorish Science Temple. He restructured the gang's leadership and expanded their criminal activities. In the 1980s, Fort's involvement in drug trafficking led to a 13-year prison sentence in 1983. While incarcerated, he continued his criminal enterprise, conspiring with Libya to commit domestic terrorism, which resulted in an 80-year sentence in 1987. Another conviction for a 1981 murder order added 75 years to his sentence in 1988. He currently resides in the ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, under a no human contact order since 2006. Now talking about Chicago's underworld, how can one forget this next drug lord whose life from the streets and ended up behind bars? Larry Hoover. Born in 1950, Hoover's early years were marked by his involvement in the Supreme Gangsters, a street gang in Chicago, where he engaged in criminal activities at a young age. He was romantically involved with Wendy Jenkins. Hoover's gang leadership began with the formation of the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, renaming the gang the Gangster Disciples. He also established the Folk Nation Alliance to strengthen his hold on the criminal underworld. Hoover's criminal activities led to his first life sentence in 1973 for murder, but his influence continued behind bars. He ran the gang's operations and formed the Folk Nation, further solidifying his power. In 1997, a lengthy investigation resulted in another life sentence for conspiracy, extortion, and money laundering. The Gangster Disciples faced internal strife, leading to a split in 1989 and violent conflicts. By the early 1990s, Hoover claimed to have renounced his criminal past. However, he has served multiple life sentences at ADX Florence Prison in Colorado, with his legal battles attracting attention from advocates and celebrities alike. His wife, Wendy Jenkins Hoover, has been a driving force in advocating for his release. This effort gained momentum with the support of Kanye West, who featured Hoover's son on his album Donda, calling for his father's freedom. Next up is a former mobster and drug lord who became the first black owner of the iconic Apollo Theater, Guy Fischer. Fisher was a prominent member of the Council, an African-American crime organization that controlled Harlem's heroin trade from 1972 to 1983. His criminal activities led to a life sentence without parole in 1984 for RICO violations, drug trafficking, and murder. The conviction was largely due to the testimony of his former associate and rival, Leroy Nikki Barnes, who became a government informant in exchange for his freedom. While in prison, Fisher vehemently denied the existence of the Council.
Was there a drug council?
Oh, the drug council is a myth. It's the first time I heard of council was when I was in court in 1983.
Fisher's life sentence sent him into the depths of the criminal justice system. However, on October 28, 2020, he was released from federal custody on a medical pardon. Next up is another drug kingpin who dominated Harlem, Kenneth Supreme McGriff. McGriff rose to fame in 1981 when he established the Supreme Team, a crack cocaine distribution and manufacturing organization based in the Baisley Park houses in South Jamaica, Queens. McGriff's criminal enterprise led to his arrest in 1987, and in 1989, he pleaded guilty to engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, resulting in a 12-year prison sentence. McGriff was released on parole in early 1994 after serving 5 years, but his freedom was short-lived. By the end of the year, he was back in prison for parole violations, serving an additional 2.5 years before his release in 1997. He was then convicted of ordering the 2001 murder of rapper Eric E. Moneybags Smith in retaliation for the death of his friend Colbert Black Just Johnson. Federal authorities also accused him of involvement in the 2002 murder of Jam Master Jay, a member of Run DMC, and the attempted murder of 50 Cent. In 2007, he was found guilty of murder for hire and drug trafficking charges at a federal court in the Eastern District of New York. After a 5-day jury deliberation, he was sentenced to life in prison at ADX Florence and was later transferred to another high-security federal prison. While Kenneth Supreme McGriff's drug empire was based out of Queens, another drug lord, Christopher Koch, was making a name for himself in Jamaica. Christopher Koch. Born in 1969 in Kingston, Jamaica, Koch was the youngest son of Lester Lloyd Koch. His father founded the Shower Posse, a violent drug gang responsible for distributing large quantities of cocaine and marijuana in Jamaica and the United States. The family lived in luxury, but their wealth came at a high cost, as the drug trade brought violence to their doorstep. Koch's siblings were killed in drug-related incidents in 1987 and 2004, and his father died in a mysterious prison fire in 1992 while awaiting extradition to the U.S. At 23, Koch took over the Shower Posse and the Tivoli Gardens community in West Kingston after his father's death. He became a community leader, providing financial support and community centers to the poor, which earned him widespread local support. The Jamaican police could not enter Tivoli Gardens without his consent. In 2009, the U.S. requested Koch's extradition on drug trafficking charges, but Jamaican Prime Minister Bruce Golding initially refused. However, in May 2010, Golding relented. Koch attempted to surrender to the U.S. Embassy in Kingston while disguised as a woman, but was recognized and detained at a roadblock. He feared for his safety and voluntarily waived his extradition trial, saying he wanted to end drug-related violence, which had claimed the lives of his family members. Koch was held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City during the trial. In 2012, he was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison and is currently incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution, Fort Dix, with a release date of January 25, 2030. Coming back to Harlem's underworld, there is a drug lord whose nickname was derived by a bump on the back of his head: Bumpy Johnson. Johnson's childhood was marked by tragedy when his older brother, Willie, was accused of taking out a white man, prompting his parents to send him to Harlem at age 10 to live with relatives. As a teenager, he dropped out of high school and entered the criminal world, catching the attention of gangster William Hewitt. Johnson's criminal career took off as an associate and enforcer for the numbers queen, Madame Stephanie St. Clair. In the 1930s, he rose through the ranks, becoming her most trusted soldier. After St. Clair's arrest, Johnson made a deal with the Mafia, quickly building his own organization. In 1952, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for a drug conspiracy conviction, serving most of his time at the infamous Alcatraz prison. Released in 1963, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack in 1968 at age 62, while under federal indictment for drug conspiracy. Next up is a drug lord who vanished from the trace of earth and nobody still knows where he is: Frank Matthew. Born on February 13, 1944 in Durham, North Carolina, Matthews lost his mother at age 4 and was raised by his aunt, who was married to a Durham Police Department lieutenant. At 14, he led a teenage gang, stealing chickens and assaulting a farmer, which led to a 1-year sentence in 1960. After his release, Matthews moved to Philadelphia, where he worked as a numbers writer and made connections with the Black Mafia and Major Coxon. In 1963, Matthews relocated to Brooklyn, New York, working as a barber, loan shark, and enforcer. In 1965, 1965, he entered the heroin trade, seeking more significant profits. He attempted to partner with the Gambino and Bonanno crime families, but was rejected. Through a Cuban mafia boss, Rolando Lucas Gonzalez Nunez, Matthews connected with a Colombian supplier, Rolando Lucas, who sold him his first kilogram of cocaine for $20,000. Matthews and Gonzalez formed a lucrative drug trafficking network, with Gonzalez supplying large quantities of cocaine and heroin from South America. By the early 1970s, Matthews' organization was handling multi-million-dollar loads of heroin, with Matthews earning an estimated $10 million in 1972. He was arrested in 1973 on tax evasion and drug charges, but after posting bail, he disappeared with his girlfriend, allegedly taking $20 million. Matthews' whereabouts remain a mystery. Next up is a drug kingpin who, despite opposition from rival gangs, managed to earn an estimated $400,000 to $1 million per month. Felix Mitchell. Born on August 23, 1954 in East Oakland, Mitchell started his criminal career as a teenager, forming the 69 Mob. This crew quickly expanded, creating a heroin empire across Oakland and the Bay Area. Mitchell lived extravagantly, throwing parties, buying luxury cars, and dressing in expensive clothing. He also invested in his community, sharing his wealth with local youth and programs, which earned him folk hero status. His success, however, came with a heavy reliance on children as drug couriers and spotters, and drive-by shootings to maintain control. By the 1980s, Mitchell's empire faced constant attacks, and violence became a regular part of their operations. His high profile made him a target for law enforcement, leading to his arrest and life sentence in 1985. While serving his sentence at Leavenworth Penitentiary, Mitchell was taken out by a fellow inmate in 1986, 2 days before his 32nd birthday. Despite Mitchell's demise, the legacy of violence and organized crime he left behind continued to influence the landscape of black mafia operations for years to come. Another such example is Nikki Barnes. Born on October 15, 1933 in Harlem, New York City, Barnes had a challenging childhood, marked by an abusive alcoholic father. He turned to drug dealing at a young age to support himself, eventually becoming addicted to heroin. After a stint in jail, he overcame his addiction, and upon his release in 1965, began to build his criminal empire. While in prison, he met Crazy Joe Gallo of the Colombo crime family and Matthew Madonna of the Lucchese family, who provided him with valuable connections and knowledge about running a drug trafficking organization. In 1972, Barnes founded The Council that settled disputes, managed distribution, and handled various drug trade-related issues. By 1976, Barnes's operation had expanded across New York State, Pennsylvania, and Canada, with a sophisticated network of lieutenants, distributors, and street dealers. On June 5, 1977, the New York Times Magazine published an article titled Mr. Untouchable, featuring Barnes on the cover. This article, combined with his growing notoriety, led to his arrest and conviction for drug-related crimes. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 1978. While incarcerated, Barnes discovered that his assets were being mismanaged and the council had stopped paying his legal fees. He also learned that Guy Fischer, a fellow council member, was having an affair with his mistress. In response, Barnes decided to become a federal informant. His cooperation with the government led to a reduced sentence of 35 years, and he was released in August 1998. Similarly, another drug lord who operated in Harlem experienced a meteoric rise and a dramatic fall partially depicted in the film American Gangster. Frank Lucas. Lucas was born and raised in LaGrange, North Carolina, and his early life was marked by a tragic incident where he witnessed the Ku Klux Klan murder his cousin. This event, he claimed, motivated him to embark on a life of crime. After a fight with a former employer, Lucas fled to Harlem, where he became involved in petty crime and pool hustling. He found a mentor in gangster Bumpy Johnson, who he claimed to have worked for as a driver for 15 years. However, this association has been disputed. After Johnson's death, Lucas entered the drug trade, determined to break the mafia's monopoly. He traveled to Bangkok and met Leslie Ike Atkinson, a former U.S. Army Master Sergeant from North Carolina. Together, they established a direct heroin supply from Southeast Asia, bypassing the mafia's traditional routes. Lucas claimed to have smuggled heroin in the coffins of dead American servicemen, a detail later denied by Atkinson. Lucas's operation was highly profitable, earning him an estimated $1 million per day. He trusted only relatives and close friends from North Carolina to handle his operations, believing they were less likely to steal or succumb to the the vices of city life. His heroin was of high purity, and he invested his profits in properties across the country. However, his extravagant lifestyle and criminal activities eventually caught up with him. In 1975, Lucas's home in Teaneck, New Jersey was raided, and authorities found over $500,000 in cash. He was convicted of federal and state drug charges and sentenced to 70 years in prison. However, he became an informant, providing information that led to over 100 convictions. In exchange, he and his family entered the Witness Protection Program. In 1981, his sentences were reduced to time served plus lifetime parole. Lucas faced additional drug charges in 1984 and was released in 1991. In 2012, he pled guilty to attempting to cash a federal disability check twice and was sentenced to 5 years probation due to his age and poor health. Why stop here? To dive deeper into the intriguing world of crime, click on one of the cards on your screen to continue.